everyone, and welcome back to the futuristic and not remotely mystical Comic Vault. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And I just spoiled the end of Ronin. Today, Eric and I are going to review Frank Miller's Ronin, one of Frank Miller's most important masterworks, and a thing that I think a lot of people in the industry talk about, as we mentioned earlier on the Omnibus, but that I don't know if nearly as many comic fans have read next to Dark Knight Returns and Sin City and that kind of thing, which is the thing I wanted to ask you about. I'm surprised if it's never been an option, it hasn't been an option.
It has been optioned.
Well, of course it has.
It was supposed to be a movie like right after 300, and then Sci-Fi was going to do a miniseries.
Oh, okay.
It's been bandied about. I'm sure there's been an announcement recently, too. This is constantly in some kind of development.
Yeah. We should have looked that up, because every time we review something, there's news from, like, 2 weeks ago that we didn't hear about.
Yeah.
Seems like that always ends up happening.
Yeah.
Eric, let's spend about half an hour on this, and why don't you... Pardon me, get us into this. I want to ask you this question. You said that at one time you considered this your favorite Frank Miller thing, but you hadn't read it in a long time, and you weren't sure if that would remain true. Would you make that statement now, or are you kind of on the fence about it?
No, I wouldn't make that statement now. One of the things I really liked about this book was I have a tendency to like bands' albums the one before they find their sound. Like, I like the rawness, I like the passion. I've always thought this kind of had that, especially next to, like, Dark Knight Returns. And it does, and I do really appreciate that about it.
Now, you're having said that, because you made that statement to me off camera, before I read it, it's tighter than I thought it would be.
Yeah. No, it is, it's
I mean, it very much has a sense of direction and knows precisely where it's going, and he's writing for an ending.
Yeah. I think...
But it doesn't have that as much as you once thought it did.
No, it still has that. It's just there are things about it that we have a number of pages that my eyes just glaze over, the science fiction-y things. It's when the people are talking in the room, right? Yep. No other Frank Miller book has something
right
like that
in the middle. There's about 10 pages where I never was totally sure what was going on because I just didn't care. And on a second read, I'm sure that stuff will be brought to light, and I'll know what the point of it is, and it will matter, and it will probably open it up for me. But
I don't know if it's gonna not be boring though.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's
I'm just saying it might inform something, and I might understand the book better.
There's bits in this that I think are a little dull, and that's not really a thing I think of with Frank Miller. Not that's bad. It's still a great book. My favorite.
Like, there's downtime and stuff. I mean, that's good. But.
Probably A Dame to Kill For, possibly Born Again. But I like most Miller stuff, so. But yeah, so
yeah. And of course, I'm not a big
favorite.
Miller guy, and I haven't read anything like as much as you have, because you've read most of the catalog. But for me, I guess it would probably be a toss-up between Born Again and Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah. And I love Dark Knight Returns, it's just not my tops. But yeah, I read this when I was younger and just adored it. I don't think it's the first Miller comic I read. I'm pretty sure I read Dark Knight Returns before this, and maybe even some Sin City. But now I remember really liking it. Going back to it, it's a lot more complex than I remember it being. And it's a lot more science fiction-y than I remember it being. Like, I always remember the twist.
Like classic science fiction.
Yeah. I always remember the twist ending, but I didn't remember how much stuff with the biotech. I didn't remember all of that stuff.
Yeah. The Living City.
Yeah, and the city like expanding outwards that we keep cutting back to.
That's kind of the big bad, yeah.
Yeah. No, I just remembered it being like a sentient building. I didn't remember that like, oh no, we're doing something with this nanotech thing.
Yeah, I didn't expect that this major work that Frank Miller, well, and honestly, I didn't know it was science fiction at all before I picked it up. But this major work that has influenced so many other comics creators, and especially just people who do stuff in feudal Japan. It's not even a feudal Japan book. Everybody talks about Ronin. And so I expected it to be more of that kind of thing. I don't think of Frank Miller and cyberpunk in the same sentence. It's cyberpunk.
No, it's absolutely
straight up cyberpunk.
Yep. I think
there's a huge, giant identity question through this about computer program changing our minds. I mean, like it's cyberpunk.
I think it falls in that high tech, low life thing. Because the world sucks.
Yes, very much so. And it looks a lot like the world of Dark Knight Returns.
Yes, it does.
In some ways, they can almost be in the same universe.
I think this is a big reason everyone thinks that Dark Knight Returns is set in the future.
Because it looks so much like this, and this is set in the future.
Now, this was not a huge success commercially. But also kind of a big deal in that this was a major book published by DC. This is published by DC. It's the first thing he does, because DC lets him do whatever he wants.
That's why the leader of the Panthers is wearing a Superman suit.
Yes.
They can get away with that.
Yes.
Because...
although Storm's in this book.
Well, yeah, but it's not actually Storm. Yeah, no, there's a well, I was going to say Nazi. I guess she's got to be part of the Panthers too, right?
Is she part of the Panthers or is she a Nazi? I think she's a Nazi. No.
But she's black.
Yeah, she must be part of the Panthers.
I was confused about that. I got to look at it again. This is a pretty dense thing.
I thought she had a swastika on her arm.
That's what I'm saying. I thought she had a swastika on her arm. Am I remembering that wrong?
Maybe not.
The weird sentences you have to put together when you're reading a Frank Miller book.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, he loves swastikas.
Yes, he does.
Both of them. The Nazi one and the Buddhist one. He just seems to like drawing that specific, like, jaggedy...
Yeah. And is it just because it's provocative? Is it just because...
Well,
and some of it is because, like, he certainly likes talking about, racial prejudice.
Yeah, some of it's because it's provocative, surely.
Shock factor.
But I think in a more intellectual, provocative.
Certainly, because
she must be a Panther. I'm not.
Again, it's toward the beginning, but certainly when Frank Miller does things that I would describe as shock factor, it's almost always, especially earlier Miller, within a more cerebral context.
Yeah, yeah. But we were talking about something before we got off on the Storm thing. Oh, okay. So this is a seminal work when it's released because. And the reason he goes over to DC is they give him, like, complete creative freedom, and not just you can tell whatever story you want. He got to have 6 48-page issues. He could tell it in whatever format he wanted.
Wow.
And I think it also had the glossy pages. Because Dark Knight Returns has glossy pages. I think he also gets the glossy prestige format.
The prestige format.
Yeah. So, like, it's kind of a big deal when it happens. But I want to say it does not do especially well commercially. Like, I think it does okay, but I don't think even then people were reading it, especially not compared to Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah. It is pre-Dark Knight Returns, though, right? Or is it right after that?
No, it's pre. It's like 2 or 3 years before.
Yeah, I thought so. I didn't actually go back and check the date.
Miller once described this book in what I think is the most accurate way I think you could describe it, which is, he says he loves this book because you can physically... like, feel the cuffs coming off artistically. He's coming off of Daredevil. He can, and it's just him.
Yeah, he's finding his raw style.
Yeah. Especially in his art, but also in his writing.
Yeah, no, his unique voice is there. But what I like about it is, in between Daredevil and Dark Knight Returns, he doesn't have the straight up purple prose yet, and it's a little bit more straightforward. It's a little bit easier to tell what's going on.
Sure.
Than some of the stuff by him that I've read. And he doesn't feel as in love with the sound of his own voice, which sounds like a really mean thing to say, but
he has not discovered his level of repetition yet.
That's what I was going to say. I think, and that can be a really useful device for him, but he overuses it. He hasn't found that voice yet, but I think he has found his voice, if that makes any sense. I think some of that is
This is unmistakably a Frank Miller book.
When he gets into that stuff, it's somewhat of his... I don't mean necessarily buying his own praise, or his own press, but it's... Yeah, he's done enough commercial work, and he's famous enough that he kind of gets used to, this is how I write, and like, but I think this is kind of just his own style for himself before it's for anybody else.
Yeah. And this is very much this is what I want to do. There's no reason to do this book when it comes out. Ninjas aren't the craze they are yet. I guess Cyberpunk's kind of taking off. I don't think that was ever a mainstream. Like, there's no reason for him to do this. He's not chumping on any trends. He's not... Like, this is just whatever he wanted to make in that moment.
No, and it feels like raw imagination. I mean, it's wonderful in that way. It still reads really fresh to me right now, which, again, is amazing because of how much influence you hear comic creators cite for this. Again, Eastman and Laird, and like people who talk a lot about Frank Miller and street level stuff. They go to Daredevil and they go to Ronin, and Ronin's not... I mean, it's street level in that it's with the future stuff, and most of it is in the future. It is about like urban degradation.
It's a trash can fire future.
Right, it absolutely is that. So I get aesthetically why they're saying that, but it's about different things than Daredevil is about. I mean, it's about some of the same things too.
Yeah. Well, it's about different things than I think a lot of... Like, Miller hates authority. He hates the government. He hates corporations. And and we get the government side of that more often moving forward.
Yeah,
like
here it's definitely the corporate
Sin City,
side.
it's all government, church, things like that.
And there's a little bit of religion here too.
There is a little bit of religion
early on. But you know what's interesting?
I think that page is hilarious.
It is really funny. No, I had that too. At first, I wanted to be horrified, and then I thought it was kind of funny. But jumping off of something you said, because I didn't think about this until just now. A big thing it has in common with Dark Knight Returns, but Dark Knight Returns pulls it to the forefront, is incompetent and complacent government.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the corporation is able to take a foothold because the government isn't doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
That is very much... Remember, they don't have a police force.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know why.
They just don't.
I mean, it obviously has something to do with the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Everything fell apart, and there's this big depression, but there's actually not any talk about police not getting funding or anything like that. There just is no force.
Yeah, there are security forces. Like, the company has their own security force, but there's no police.
Yeah. So RoboCop must look at this book.
I don't know.
I mean, we know that Frank Miller's a big inspiration on that movie.
No, we don't. It comes out same year.
Do we not know that?
Or the year after? No, that seems to be... if I remember correctly, Dark Knight Returns and RoboCop come out, like, almost simultaneously.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I thought Verhoeven talked about Frank Miller. He could have read this.
That's possible.
This could have influenced RoboCop.
I don't know if Verhoeven talks about Frank Miller.
I thought he might be
right.
Well, it's been a long time since I looked at the special features on that. I thought he had discussed Frank Miller.
I'm not sure.
But you and I had this conversation where it also might have just been a zeitgeist thing, and then obviously Frank Miller gets involved after that.
Well, it makes perfect sense that you would get this guy to write.
They just fit
RoboCop
together,
sequel.
yeah. So no, I don't want to go on record and misspeak and say things that aren't true. I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time reading this and not thinking Verhoeven must have read this book.
Yeah, but you could say the same thing about Dark Knight Returns, and I'm almost positive that there's no possible way RoboCop was influenced by that.
That's true, but this specifically comes right out and says there's no police force and a corporation is replacing it.
That's true. Yeah.
Not with robots.
Yeah. I mean, there's an artificial intelligence question, but that's not really the way RoboCop deals with it.
No, it's not. I was certainly getting some of those vibes, but yeah, it does deal with that in different ways. But it does deal with the artificial limb thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Like all of that's there.
Yep. And that stuff's really interesting.
Really interesting. Yeah. Let's get into.
And it deals with perception.
Mm-hmm. I want to get into the protagonist and what turns out to not be the protagonist you thought it was, because that's the thing that I find most fascinating about this book, and how fresh it feels that 1,000 things haven't ripped that off. I've never read that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never read this book. I don't, or at least I don't remember ever reading anything really, I don't know, maybe I have, but I can't think of anything major, where you're reading about a protagonist and that person turns out to not exist at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't really think of anything.
Yep. I can't either.
Again, certainly not anything major.
Where it's not like, and like he was dead the whole time or something like that.
Yeah.
We're like no, everything he does happens. It's all about perception.
Mm-hmm. But it is all manufactured. It is all in somebody's head.
Mm-hmm.
It happens for him. It's that Nero thing. Like, it does matter.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no magic.
No, there is no magic.
You know, the big bad guy is not the real big bad guy, and he doesn't exist.
Yep.
And all of that, and it's just
it's such a plot twist that, like, and one of the things I like
and he's obviously working toward it the entire time.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it does not feel like a gimmicky plot twist where we weren't on our way there.
Yeah. One of the things I really like, well, and this, so I read this a couple of years, but like obviously I knew what the plot twist was. It is telegraphed. It is the first time.
Very much so. Yeah.
The first time a guy and the computer talk, he is subservient.
Yeah. No, there's weird hints, and even before you know it for sure, you kind of know it, which I like. Where I wasn't completely blindsided by the fact that the guy that you thought was like totally dead and gone. So we should provide some context for people that haven't read this. There's a character. This is a hard book to describe, I think.
Do you want me to try?
No. Let me try, because you always do the synopsis thing. Let me try part of this, and you can back me up. You can help me out. I need backup. So there's this corporation that has this big, like, living city that turns out, and we don't know this right away either, they kind of reveal it a little bit later, that it's like this fully sentient city that nobody knows what exactly it's able to do and how alive it is. And they talk to it, and they can give this corporation, and it's Aquarius. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And
it's not the city at first. It's just because it grows throughout the comic.
Right.
It's just this, like, I don't know what you call it, like a battle station. Like it's not a skyscraper.
No, that's true. It was big enough early on. I was still thinking of it like a city, just because it was organized kind of like that. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Like, it keeps growing.
It's like a dome city that then grows out beyond.
We constantly get these two big spreads where it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And anyway, within it, there is this character who has been limbless from birth, who has telekinesis, and nobody knows it.
Yeah, the idea is that without arms you have a heightened not awareness, but like a heightened
cognitive ability.
Yes,
you can,
I think we do in an X-Files episode. I think we play with that in something.
We do, yeah. You can move things around with your mind, maybe, and like he's naturally born that way.
Yeah,
and they try to make it a scientific thing.
You're more inclined like that.
Yeah, and he's been having he functions within the system. What exactly do they do with him? I forget. They're
using him to do to create the cybernetic limbs. They're showing look, because they want to sell it as weapons.
That's what it is, okay.
And then he's like, but nobody else can do that. Oh, I can do this because I'm...
The way he was connected up to it, I thought he was working within the city, part of that whole thing somehow.
I don't think so. I think he just
I guess I'm wrong
lives
about it,
by himself, and then he just does tests and stuff. He works there.
Yeah. And it turns out, we find out by the end, given memories of something, or memories, he's given these, kind of memories of a thing that never happened from feudal Japan, 700 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's everything we saw at the beginning that we thought was just the book, that you thought was just the main events of the book, and I thought it was going to cut back and forth between them. And then it turns out that none of that stuff ever happened. We get all this mythology at the beginning that turns out to not actually be real, and there's a physical explanation for all of it.
And it was a TV show. It's a Japanese TV show.
Oh, I missed that.
Oh, yeah. And there's some hints towards that.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, so there's some hints towards that where the Japanese people, when they show the Ronin, and the Japanese people that are there, they're like, well, we understand this is like a cultural icon for him. He's like, oh yes, he's very popular. I remember it from when I was a kid. And there's a point later where you see a TV screen of it. So everything with Ronin is based on a television series from Japan.
That's also a very Verhoeven idea.
Yes. But there's so what you think is happening when you're reading the book is that hundreds of years ago, a samurai kills a demon. They both get sealed in this special sword.
Yep.
And then the special sword is broken, and Billy, who's this guy without arms and legs, is possessed by that, and the demon is possessing another guy. And then you find out that
we're led to believe initially, kind of from the Ronin's perspective, that he's reincarnated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his soul is in Billy's body.
Yeah, and so we have an explanation for what's going on even in the future that turns out to not be true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because we get a lot of this through the female protagonist, who is working for the company, and she works for the company, right?
Yeah,
and
she's the head of security.
And she is taking all this in, and that's one of the big tells, too, that, she's not buying it right away, and then as time goes on, she starts to echo the thing she was told early on, which is, it's in the 21st century, have an open mind. And it turns out that none of that is actually real or possible.
I love when we get to the big battle sequence and it's through her perspective where you see what he sees, which is he's fighting ancient feudal demon swordsmen.
Yeah.
And then you see the robots. I think that's done so well.
How do you feel about the? I want to get into a few nitty-gritty things here. We got about 10 minutes left. How do you feel about the revenge motive from her until they finally sleep together and she kind of loses that whole thing? She's upset because he kills her men when he first wakes up.
Mm-hmm. I think it plays.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about the reversal. I don't know about when she gets over it, but then she's not in the right mind. There's all these external factors.
Yeah.
Which makes it very difficult to...
It's real screwed up when you find out what all is actually really happening. I have really mixed emotions about both Billy and the Ronin at the end. I don't know, because they're kind of intertwined in the same person by the end. This is one of the coolest big identity question marks I've ever read in anything.
Mm-hmm. Because it also, for Billy, if through a certain lens, this is the male power fantasy wish fulfillment.
Right.
He is getting to live that out. He gets to be with the woman that he's in love with. He gets to be like a cool badass killer.
And that whole reality was put in his brain to I don't know, like kind of make him more docile and stuff, because it turns out that he actually murdered people when he was a kid. Because they were making fun of these kids, making fun of him for not having limbs, and he accidentally murders them, and then his mom calls him a monster.
Yeah, it's like the girl from Hellboy, who like accidentally like murdered like a bunch of school bullies with her fire.
Yeah,
like, he didn't mean to do it. There's just these kids picking on him, and then he's like shut up, and then they like explode. Like we don't see
kind
it.
of what we tried to do with Phoenix and X3.
Yes, like that as well. Yeah. He's a very powerful psychic person.
Yeah, and so like you feel for him. He's really sympathetic. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like if that had continued, he probably would have become a psychopath. Was the sense I got.
I'm not sure, because he's really remorseful.
Well, that's true.
Because he's not an invalid, but he's not an adult either.
I'm still feeling that out. I'm still trying to figure out how to read that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this like a couple hours after I read it once.
Both Billy and the Ronin
are
the most
to talk about it yet.
Like un-Frank Miller-y protagonist,
You
right?
think so?
Yeah, like they're not tough guys at all, either of them. Like, I mean,
no, and they're not flawed in the same way that his heroes usually are. I mean, like Ronin is kind of the stalwart, does no wrong hero to some degree. I mean, like, yeah, he does in the past that didn't actually happen. Kill a good person for the right reasons.
Does he?
And you have that whole thing. Well, because you have to kill a good person.
He kills himself.
Oh, was that what it was?
Yeah.
See, again, I read this once. And
yeah. He stabs through himself into the demon.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
That's how he gets around that, and because he is that pure.
And it's interesting because all he wanted to do was die for his master. Mm-hmm. And at first, I thought, it being a Frank Miller thing, that he was going to have some kind of a death wish and actually really wanted to die because he had a tragic past or something. Mm-hmm. And that's like not what it is at all.
No, he's so pure, and
I thought he killed the mouse guy, and that was supposed to be the pure person that he kills.
No, because the mouse guy is
missed that.
Not pure, I wouldn't think.
Well, I actually looked back over that again because I was like, well, he's just protecting his people. Like maybe that is supposed to... I really loved the bit right before that when the woman that he's with thinks that he's going to kill her child, and then he says, no, and I'm not going to kill you either because you're not that pure.
Yeah.
Because she had her baby with some other man, and that's why she was kicked out of the house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like that scene a lot.
Yeah.
And then it's weird because none of these people existed. That might have been a scene in the TV show. You don't know.
Yeah. He's just like, and I think the Frank Miller-ness of it is that he doesn't exist.
Right.
He isn't actually that pure.
So maybe a person like that can't exist.
Yeah.
But then Billy is not as flawed and screwed up as I initially kind of thought maybe he was.
No, he's also kind of pure-hearted, but he's also not all there.
Yeah.
Which, again,
which is why my initial read was maybe he would have gone nuts and been kind of serial killer-ish had that continued, if he kept kind of, accidentally... I'm also thinking of, Fire Fist.
Yeah,
Deadpool 2, characters like that.
That's possible, I don't know.
Yeah.
He seems real innocent.
Yeah, he does toward the beginning too, and then I had this place where I felt like it turned, and now he's like a bad guy, and then he's not.
Well, and everything he does as the Ronin is kind of excused because he doesn't actually think he's doing it.
Yeah,
he thinks he's possessed by the spirit of an ancient samurai.
No, that's right. Yeah, and then when the Ronin starts having flashes to his childhood and stuff, they start to merge and become very much the same character. And then you have to ask the wonderfully interesting existential question: does she I forget her name.
The security guard?
I don't remember. Does the female protagonist...
and she really is the protagonist of the story.
She is. Does she fall in love with the Ronin, or does she fall in love with Billy? And of course the answer is some combination of the two.
Well, and does she fall in love at all because it's so altered. Like, the perceptions are so skewed, she doesn't... because she's not entirely herself anyways.
The telekinesis in this also works differently than telekinesis has ever worked in anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because he seems to have, like, persuasion over people to some degree, I thought is what was going on with that.
I think there's some of that, and I also think that there's...
How else do you...
I think that they say that they're pumping something into the city as well.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Oh, yeah, and you had that whole thing where Ronin... because they wouldn't have had that technology back then, doesn't even think to hold his breath. You remember that?
Yeah. Yes. I can't find her name right off, but she's the Frank Miller character. She's the flawed one who has a bad relationship with her spouse and then ends up cheating on her spouse, and like she's the one that's all messed up and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe it's not so like un-Frank Miller-y. Because you do kind of have that protagonist in her.
I love backdoor protagonists so much.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who the story was really about until the end.
Yeah. How do you feel about the ending? Because I've never known how to read it. Where everything explodes and the Ronin standing in front of her.
I didn't know how to read that either. No, I was really confused. And I think it's supposed to be ambiguous.
No, I think so too.
I think the idea is that's who she sort of fell in love with, so that's who she's seeing, but we don't know what we're really seeing. Because there's a lot of that in this book. You're talking about perceptions. There's a lot of places where we're looking through the eyes of a particular character and we're seeing what they're seeing, but that's not necessarily what's actually there. Because sometimes you see the demon guy, and sometimes you see the actual man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's clearly done for our benefit, right? Or maybe it's not, because...
I think sometimes it's to throw us off.
But is it possible that... Because that person thinks that they are the demon.
Exactly.
So they're just naturally going back and forth like they would.
Yeah.
It's really tight in that way. Well, there's not...
Again, that's one of the early tells, because there is a place before we've been told exactly what's going on where you see where you see that guy, the human guy, and the demon, like, in cross panels.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure what to make of it yet.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that I don't care about the science of the science fiction of it. I like the idea of the biotech, and I love the idea of developing biotech because we're killing the planet.
Sure, of course.
And then immediately using it badly, and immediately trying to sell it to, like, other countries as weapons.
Yeah.
I love that. I don't need whole pages explaining to me exactly how it works, or like it wasn't even exactly how it works. All of those discussions, I feel weighed down.
Yeah, I did think the exposition, particularly about the pseudoscience, was sometimes kind of bogged the book down.
I'm also not sure what to take from the security woman's husband. I don't really know.
That was one of those things I felt like I needed another read for.
It's kind of got this Frank Miller thing of, like, women don't like heavily masculine men.
Yeah.
And so, like, they don't seem...
Especially if they're pretty masculine themselves. And she definitely has that.
So, like, they don't seem super unhappy, like they've been having problems. But, like, that does seem to be a Miller thing, is women don't like... Effeminate's the wrong word, but, like, more mousy men. Like they want the man. And that's kind of what the Ronin is. But then everything else that guy does is not... Like, it's only in comparison. He doesn't seem like... And we have this in Sin City where, like, you have like, the really weak men, right?
Yeah.
He's not that. He's not a joke character. He's not wimpy. It's really by comparison, because he dies, like, trying to help and trying to save everyone.
Yeah, so he's not a coward.
Yeah. But I don't know exactly what to make of that.
I mean, I think some of that is just Miller intentionally creating, for the time, an unusual dynamic. And, you know, we make a big deal out of that at the end, that she's not the typical damsel in distress character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she
that comes
kind
up.
of.
She's that was the thing I wanted to ask you about. It's like she was cast on purpose or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and because when you get to the final issue of this, you realize, which is I think when it really hammers home that she's the protagonist.
Yeah.
The Ronin does nothing for the last issue. The Ronin and Billy, Billy is involved in the climax, but it's all about her trying to get through all of this and fixing everything and fighting back.
Yeah, I mean, how would you describe her character arc? What does she learn? Where does she start and where does she end?
I don't know.
As the protagonist,
I'm not sure.
That's a thing I've really got to think about and piece together.
I think she loosens up and gets a little bit more wild, which is a very traditional Frank Miller character arc.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure.
Does she gain or lose some of her humanity?
I think she must gain some of her humanity because she's just working as a tough as nails security officer, and by the end she's kind of trying to save the world.
Yeah. And it's not just about the business anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about doing her job. It's bigger than that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say if the Ronin taught her something.
Mm-hmm.
And in some of the reason that it's difficult for me to land on some of that is because, like you, I wasn't sure I bought the way they got together.
Mm-hmm. Or at least not as a character thing, because I buy that it happens when we find out that there's pheromones being pumped into the city and things like that.
But that ends up being
but it's not a choice.
You're impaired.
Mm-hmm.
It's like alcohol. It's like red kryptonite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need another read of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff I could be talking about and analyzing that I'm just not ready to do with such a.
It's a real dense book.
That's precisely what I was about to say. Let's before we wrap up with this, let's talk about the art.
Okay.
Compared to other Frank Miller things, where do you think he is? Is this as good as Dark Knight Returns, or has he refined it by then? Because it's a similar style and how sketchy it is.
I've always thought of it as kind of the halfway point between his more traditional Daredevil and Dark Knight Returns.
You think so?
But when I read it this time, I'm like, oh, this is just him doing Mobius. A lot of this is him doing Mobius. The faces and the lines, he never does lines on the face like he does in this. So I'm not.
Even Aquarius looks like a Mobius thing to me.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure if I've always thought this is a halfway point. This is a stage in his evolution. I'm not actually sure it is. I mean, it is obviously, but not in the way I thought. Where he's not yet to Dark Knight Returns. It's a different style than what he does in Dark Knight Returns. He's experimenting in the same way that Sin City is a different style than what he was doing in Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah. Well, and you can compare this easily to both of those things, and those things look very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
He's got shadow work that reminds me of the noirish qualities of Dark Knight or of Sin City, but a lot of the street level gang stuff, the sketchiness of it, and even designs of characters and faces. I mean, you have straight up almost mutants in this.
Yeah. I think artistically, I like Dark Knight Returns more, because I think this is him experimenting.
I was pretty captivated by it, though, and it's weird how it's so experimental, it transcends time for me. It feels like if somebody made this tomorrow, it's real new and different.
Just as politically relevant
and
too.
out there. That too, yeah, ideal-wise as well. Certainly.
Frank Miller is so far ahead of the curve politically when he makes this. He's on a different curve than everybody else.
It's absolutely insane.
It's insane how far ahead he was. But no, I think I like Dark Knight Returns more because I think you see him trying a bunch of different things, whereas Dark Knight Returns, he knows exactly what he's doing. That book is built on a 16-panel grid that evolves and kind of morphs and moves, but it knows what it's doing. Whereas here, sometimes I think he's trying one thing, sometimes he's trying a different thing, and I think that's a more confident piece.
Thematically, I'm going to go farther
Artistically.
Yes. Thematically, I'm going to go farther than you did in saying that it's about some of the same things Dark Knight Returns is. I think they're companion pieces. I think if you love Dark Knight Returns, you do yourself a disservice if you don't read this.
I agree.
Because of what we said early on in this discussion, this gives you the corporate side of the same coin with the government side, and there's obviously some criticism of big business in Dark Knight Returns as well. But this is entirely that, and it's about taking advantage of technology and playing God and not being responsible with that. And it is to be fair, except that the technology is real different and interesting, and it's important that it has an organic component, of course. But it is that kind of standard, we create something that outlives us. And
I love that it's organic. That still feels fresh.
Yeah.
We're still doing nanobots. And in 1984 or whatever, Frank Miller was like, well, it's going to be organic because...
Yeah, not that I haven't seen that since then, but, I mean, you're right. Like, it's real ahead of its time.
But anytime we do this kind of story, it's always tech. It's not biotech.
Yeah. You know
really
who else I got? I got some flashes of looking at the art for this. It's not the same thing, certainly, but I got a little bit of Windsor Smith.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, I can see that completely. And you can also see how much the Eastman and Laird were influenced by this.
Yes, of course.
But no, if people haven't read Ronin, we've spoiled it. I'm sorry.
I didn't know how to talk about it without doing it, and we usually do that on this show because there are people who watch this show to find out about comics that aren't going to read comics. But that's the nuts and bolts what happens in Ronin.
One of the big things is if you love Samurai Jack and you don't know the ending,
yes,
it feels like an even bigger reveal because Samurai Jack, I'm pretty sure was conceived of at least on some level as like, yeah, I really liked Ronin, but I kind of wanted it to be the Samurai Demon thing. Well, so what if we did the Samurai? What if that was what it really was?
But that's why Samurai Jack has the time travel component.
Yes. Well, and so when I first read this, I just knew that Samurai Jack. This was inspired by Samurai Jack, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, well, yes, of course.
You mean Samurai Jack was inspired by this?
Yeah. Samurai Jack was inspired by this, and I'm like reading. I'm like, well, yeah, of course. Like, how did they not get sued? And I got to the end, and I was like, oh,
it's a totally different thing.
Yeah,
and that feels like a love letter to this. There's no way Frank Miller doesn't like Samurai Jack. I would think. I would
imagine so.
That.
Well, and we know they like Frank Miller. They do a 300 episode.
Oh, cool.
Way before that movie comes out, just because they're fans of whatnot.
That's really interesting.
But yeah, it's kind of the forgotten Frank Miller masterpiece, and I mean, I think most things he does are masterpieces, at least until the 2000s. Almost everything he does is.
I agree. That absolutely is, and
it's a flawed masterpiece, but it's still a masterpiece.
To something you said earlier, but mostly just in pacing and stuff. I think the and in how long the exposition scenes go, I think it probably could have been an issue shorter. I'll go that far.
Yeah.
But maybe that's an easy thing to say, but. Going full circle to something you said early on, I think the word I don't know if you said it this way, the word of the day with this is unabashed. It just felt like he made it in his basement and DC was nice enough to publish it for him. And I think Frank Miller, this goes without saying, and Alan Moore too, but Frank Miller changed the nature of that company. And obviously, thank God for certain people in editorial at the time. But, mainstream comic companies were not publishing things like this.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what the woman's name is.
I couldn't think of it right away either. That's why I said
she ends up running.
Yeah, I know who that is, and I didn't say it because I couldn't think of it right off. I mean, I didn't.
And they always update these in the.
And she's been in so many documentaries.
Yep, and she ran Vertigo.
She's a really
most
cool lady. I can't think of her name right now.
But she's
it's on the tip of my tongue too. I'm so all over it, and I just can't.
She's like the most important person in comics that nobody talks about.
Nobody talks about her, except in those documentaries.
Yep.
And I mean, she's why Watchmen happens.
Yeah.
She's also why Watchmen couldn't be DC characters, I think.
Oh, is that her? Is she the one that says like you're breaking these and you can't?
I'm not sure. Actually, now I'm saying that, but
I cannot find an editor on that. But she's very important.
I'll think of it.
And she left only a couple of years ago. I think she leaves right before New 52, and then immediately, of course, we do New 52, right?
Yeah, she'd fit in fine with Rebirth, with Dark Universe and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got any other final thoughts? Anything else you want to make sure that gets said about Ronin?
Yeah.
Again, one of my biggest takeaways was just, this is set in the future, and like I didn't know what I was getting into at all.
I'm surprised you didn't know that. Not surprised. I didn't know you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. It's a full blown cyberpunk piece.
in my head, because of the things it inspired, I always assumed that it's a feudal Japan piece,
and that
with maybe some kind of weird science fiction elements. But I thought
at the
it
very
was
least something like Ninja Turtles, right? Where it's like feudal Japan elements brought to the modern day kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
No, that makes complete sense why you would think that.
And Tom Walt's Ninja Turtles is also in a lot of ways what this pretends to be at the beginning, because it does the incarnation thing.
Yeah, you're right.
I think he's probably also looking at Ronin. Well, and he's got to be, because he's doing Eastman and Laird's Turtles.
Yeah.
And then
you go to the thing that one of the biggest things that influenced them.
Yeah. I would like briefly to talk about another trade that I read this week. I bought this on a whim at the comic shop, and was just curious about it because I didn't know it existed. And it's about my favorite character in Black Panther, and I didn't know she got her own story. It's not just about her, but they made a big deal out of her on the cover of this because people saw Black Panther and also I think liked her. This is called Black Panther Shuri. This is the first 6 issues of a run in 2009 by Reginald Hudlin and Ken Lashley, and Eric tells me that this is actually part of a longer run that renumbered at this point, and you can tell that some major things were happening in that book and then they renumbered, because, 2009 might feel in some ways like a lifetime ago, but you remember, we were already doing a lot of this at that time where we just couldn't get past 12 issues without renumbering.
I think it renumbers after like 46 or something like that, but...
Yeah, well, and I'm being facetious when I say that, but we're just renumbering all the time.
Because I knew he had a long run, but I didn't know it got renumbered. And I think that's originally called Deadliest of the Species.
Yeah, well, and it's...
okay. They just throw Shuri on there,
so you know.
So that you buy it.
Well, that's the reason I thought to buy it. They were brilliant in doing that. They might not have worked on anybody else, but it worked on... surely it did, though, right? I can't be the only person that fell in love with that character.
No, everyone loves her. I don't know if this worked on other people. I don't know if anyone else picked it up.
That's what I'm saying. I wonder if anybody else bought this because it said Shuri, but that's why I bought it. And I thumbed through it, and I thought the art looked great, because it is. And anyway, but I guess the idea is just, we've got a female Black Panther on the cover. Who's that? So they tell you it's Shuri. So of course Shuri is T'Challa's sister, and she, in comics anyway, goes through all the same training that he does.
Interesting.
And has the potential to become a Black Panther if anything happened to him. According to this, she's basically next in line. But the thing is, you have to go to the Panther God. And if the Panther God doesn't think you're worthy, you not only don't become Black Panther, you die. And so you take but it's exactly like the movie. Otherwise, you take the heart-shaped herb, and then you face the Panther God. And they kind of do that in the movie, except there's not a talking Panther God that tells you you're worthy, you're Black Panther, or you're not worthy, and I'm going to kill you.
Well, because he's already Black Panther. At the beginning of that movie. He's not king yet, but he's Black Panther.
That's true, but when he sees the Panthers, none of them talk to him.
That's true.
But I don't know if they would in that case anyway.
Yeah,
so that's a good point. But the bad Black Panther becomes Black Panther and doesn't have to deal with that.
But does he become Black Panther, or does he just become king and give himself a Black Panther costume?
Well, he has to go through the vision thing.
Right, but that's what T'Challa does at the beginning to become king. He's already Black Panther at that point before his dad dies.
Sure, but in this, it's about the heart-shaped herb.
Okay.
That's what.
So maybe we just kind of merge those.
Yeah, we kind of merge those ideas together. Yeah, that's
knowing nothing about Black Panther. I'm just
So I learned a lot about Wakanda and specifically that mythology in this, and liked a lot for that. So I guess the first thing I should say is this is easily readable without reading anything else. It does a really good job of recapping without being obnoxious about it. What's happened recently? The status quo at the beginning of this is that Black Panther T'Challa has just married Storm, and she is going to Wakanda to kind of get accustomed to the culture and for her constituents to meet her becoming queen. And T'Challa is off somewhere and ends up getting I say somewhere. He's off to meet with Namor, and they do a really good non-linear thing with this, where at first I thought we were doing that thing where we start off in the present and then we go to the past because there's like this really exciting thing that happens, and then we were just going to be like in there for a long time before we caught up. But it actually goes back and forth a lot, so that we're not just bogged down with a lot of politics and things about what Wakanda's going to do after T'Challa gets hurt. So T'Challa goes to Namor, and he's trying to put together this, or rather, Namor is with Dr. Doom and some other people trying to put together a group to go up against Norman Osborn, and they try to bring Black Panther on. This is after the Dark Reign stuff, and he tries to bring Black Panther on, and Black Panther is not interested, and.
Then that's probably what they renumber, right? Like it's whatever the heroic age.
That's probably what it is. This is right at heroic age, isn't it? Because this would have been when Bendis was on Avengers.
That's interesting. I didn't even know there was a Black Panther comic going at that point.
Neither did I. I never knew that this existed at all. So then, when Black Panther leaves, he gets attacked by Dr. Doom and almost killed by Dr. Doom. And maybe I need to look at it again. I went back and looked over his section. I was confused. I don't completely know what his motivation was for trying to kill Black Panther. He was just very excited to try to kill Black Panther. And it's possible that this is the section where I needed to be reading this book before I would understand that. I currently sitting here do not understand why Dr. Doom at that moment attacked Black Panther. But it is an important device to get Black Panther almost dead so that he can have to go on a vision quest with Storm, who, with the help of somebody with some mystical voodoo in Wakanda, is able to kind of put her in his head and help bring him back ultimately. Sometimes those plots can be really tedious and I don't like them. Here I think it works really well. This book does a lot of stuff that I don't usually care for that I really liked in this. A lot of those people having to discover things about themselves in visions, and we kind of parallel the one that Shuri goes on and the one that T'Challa goes on, and they're kind of doing that at the same time, which is really good. Shuri is the same character she is in the movie.
Really?
And that was very exciting, because I thought I was going to read about a totally different character and that she was probably going to be a little bit more stolid and no nonsense and that kind of thing. She's a hothead. She's full of herself. It's not the same thing. She's not like Black Panther's Q like she is in the movie, but she's a tech genius still, because she's like an everything genius.
I mean, Black Panther is too in the comics.
Yeah,
like, he's
because
like the eighth most
she
smartest
has
man in the world, right?
all the same training he does, and is capable of all the Black Panther stuff, but she's not emotionally there yet. And it's a coming-of-age story, and it's basically all about her figuring out what it takes to be worthy to be the Black Panther, and I want to encourage people to read this, so I'm actually not going to give all this away, even though we just spoiled everything from Ronin. But basically, the idea in a nutshell is that she's not worthy yet, but the experience she goes through here is what makes her worthy, and it's kind of Thor done better, like the Thor movie done better, in that way, I suppose. But I loved her. I kind of fell in love with her in comics in the same way I did in the movie. I thought she was just really fun and spunky, but also had the same sense of duty that her brother does, except that there's always that kind of clash, that question of, is she doing it more for herself or is she doing it more for Wakanda? The politics surrounding all of this are really interesting, of like, who should be in line next and stuff, and Aurora is given the option to be Black Panther and doesn't take it. And that whole thing was pretty cool. But like I said, I like the art in this a lot, and I like the panel layouts in this a lot. They're really varied. They're not always super conventional. Morlun is in this, and it's kind of interesting that, and I like this idea that he goes to take the Black Panther totem, because he's always trying to take totems, and I never understand what the whole Morlun thing's about. But he goes. I
can at least tell you what it's about in JMS. I don't know what happens when Slott gets involved.
Yeah, so he goes there, and this would have been right around or right after JMS. I guess it would be after JMS, wouldn't it?
Because right after, I think.
Well, when does One More Day happen? I mean, that's the end of that whole thing.
One More Days.
That's right, like 08, 09.
Dark Reign, right before Dark Reign.
Oh no, it's earlier than I'm thinking then.
Because Dark Reign happens, and no one knows who Spider-Man is, and so the Avengers aren't sure if they can trust him. So yeah, it must happen like just a little bit before that.
But I really like that Morlun goes and tries to take the totem, and then she has to become Black Panther, and there's a question of whether she counts. And so does she even really have the totem?
Interesting.
And that's really cool. I'm trying to talk about the things I like thematically with this without giving the book away. But that I think it was a little bit convenient timing that immediately after Doctor Doom takes out Black Panther and he has to go on his vision quest, Moreland also attacks Wakanda just all at the same time. But I guess that's all I'm going to say about it. I highly recommend this. I was in love with it. That was awesome. I liked almost everything about this.
Cool.
And immediately wanted to continue reading, because the status quo we're left in at the end of this is pretty cool. And I kind of want... And also, I should say, it's not just Shuri's story, because of course they put her name on this, but as much as I loved her, it is very much a dual protagonist story, and it's as much about T'Challa as it is her.
Did you find T'Challa more interesting in, like in his own book?
Yeah, I did, and nothing against Coates, but this is what I want from Black Panther. I don't know if I would have liked this as much without the movie. I'm just not sure. It's hard to say, but like, it's exciting, but it's dialogue driven, and all the culture is really interesting, and this is gonna sound bad. It's a comic book, if that makes any sense.
It's not a novel.
Yeah, and it has, all the stuff I enjoy Marvel Comics for, but it's also thought-provoking, which also a lot of good Marvel Comics are. But it doesn't have that super slow pacing that other Black Panther that I've read has had, and like, where is this? This is what Black Panther... maybe Coates got there. Maybe that's what it is now. I don't know. But I think you would adore this. I've got the Christopher I didn't
Priest...
have Eric read this just because he's going to read some other stuff leading up to it.
Yeah, well, I've got the Christopher Priest stuff. If I read all of that, if I like it, I will probably continue on to the Rachel Hudland, because it's also collected in big, thick volumes.
If you get bored with it, though, just read that as a piece by itself.
Sure.
Because it's a really good piece by itself.
Yeah.
And I should also say, really fast read. I read that in maybe 25-30 minutes.
Oh, okay. Wow, the whole trade.
Yeah, it's real quick.
Cool.
And then kind of wanted to thumb through it again. But yeah, I want to continue on with that, and maybe get the rest of his run before it, and then try to get the rest of it after that.
Well, they've got it in those big, thick volumes, so you can do that.
Cool.
Complete collection.
I mean, that very much feels like, if I have a Black Panther, that feels like my Black Panther. So
sure.
It's wonderful. Anyway, that's going to do it for the second half of the Comic Vault today, and now Eric and I are going to move on to how we felt about. We're going to talk about a number of movies, including Artemis Hotel Artemis. See, you did that the other day, and now I can't.
I keep wanting to call it New Rose Hotel. For some reason, now I keep wanting to say that.
Why?
I don't know.
What does that mean?
New Rose Hotel is a film, I believe.
Oh,
I'm not even fully sure.
I don't know what that is.
I'm pretty sure it's a cyberpunk movie with Vincent D'Onofrio. I'm pretty sure.
But we're going to do that, and we're going to do a number of requested things. So look forward to that, and continue on with the playlist. And we'll just have a commercial break. And otherwise, thanks a bunch for clicking on this video. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Eric.
We'll see you again next time.